So, Berto, we did an entire episode on the first season of Black Mirror, and I thought we would follow that up with another episode on the second season of Black Mirror. What do you say?
Woo!
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I am a professor and a therapist. Who are you, Berto?
My name is Humberto Castaneda. I am a lactation specialist for hemp milk.
Weird. All right, let's start with episode 1 in season 2. And as with the last episode we did on Black Mirror, we are going to spoil the crap out of these. Mm-hmm. And it's such a good TV. They're basically mini movies.
Yeah.
And every episode has pretty big twists, or at least reveals, that if you hear it beforehand, it's going to ruin it. So you really...
Spoiler alert.
The shows are almost perfect at revealing enough information to keep you watching to the point where it resolves at the end and you're just like, whoa, you know. So watch, and it's only 4 episodes. It's on Netflix, and each one's about an hour-ish, and, you know, so go watch season 2, come back to this episode.
It's like the modern Twilight Zone.
Yeah. Episode 1, Be Right Back. It stars Hayley Atwell and Domhnall Gleeson.
Domhnall Gleeson. It's always hard to say his name.
Yeah. Hayley Atwell is English. You might recognize her from Captain America. She's Captain America's girlfriend in the 40s, I think.
Oh, I didn't put that together.
She's also in Jimmy, the movie about Jimi Hendrix in England. She's, I think, one of the English girlfriends.
I didn't see that movie.
It's pretty good. It has Andre from Outkast.
Oh, really?
And he plays Jimi Hendrix. Yeah.
Wow, that's
It's
great.
pretty good. I mean, the guitar lip syncing is terrible because no one can look like Jimi Hendrix on guitar. I mean, you can't do it. But
you might have gotten Prince to do it, maybe.
yeah, but you know, because Jimi Hendrix, we've all seen him play guitar so much that you just can't look like him. Yeah. Plus, Andre, I don't think is a guitarist himself. At least I don't think he's very good. Right. And so, you know, it was kind of apparent. But I liked the movie. It's a nice little snippet into his time in England and that kind of thing. A Seattleite, Jimi Hendrix.
That's right.
Domhnall Gleeson, Irish. The first movie I remember seeing him in is Never Let Me Go, which is a great movie. I've read that book. It's a great book. True Grit. He was in True Grit.
He was in True Grit? What was he?
He was Moon the Kid.
Oh.
He was in Harry Potter as Bill Weasley.
Yep.
He was in Dread, the movie Dread, which I really
still
liked.
haven't seen.
So good. Oh, dude, that's right up your alley.
Yeah.
In fact, I hope Central Cinema shows it because...
Oh, that'd be so cool.
Yeah. He was in Anna Karenina. He was in Frank. Did you see the movie Frank?
No.
With that big head, this guy has this anxiety problem, and he wears this big head on his head.
No. That sounds great.
It's actually a movie about a band. So
really?
You should totally see it. Yeah,
okay.
they're this alternative band, and they go to the woods to this cabin to record an album.
Okay.
And they have this genius who is actually, you don't realize this until the end.
Don't tell me.
Oh, okay.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, but anyway, the movie's called Frank, and the lead guy, the guy that we identify with is Domhnall Gleeson.
All right, I'll watch it. Then we can talk about it.
Unbroken, great movie about World War II. Ex Machina, which is the big Domhnall Gleeson movie. That he was in Brooklyn as one of the love interests. He was in Star Wars: Force Awakens.
That's right.
He'll be in The Last Jedi, and he was in The Revenant.
Right.
In 2015, he was in Ex Machina, Brooklyn, Star Wars, and The Revenant. He was
That's crazy.
in 4 of the best movies of that year.
Yeah, I remember that year seeing him everywhere.
Yeah. Okay, so this episode is about a young couple in the near future. They have sleeker telephones, and I love her drawing interface. She's a artist, and she has this really organic but super techie drawing desk thing that's really cool. They don't have any kids. They seemingly have a good relationship. They have a lot of fun together. They joke around a lot. But he's seemingly kind of addicted to his phone. He doesn't pay enough attention to her. He's always on his phone, and their sex life isn't too great.
Right.
So then he dies. The boyfriend or husband dies in a car accident. And after he dies, a friend of hers, of the wife's, says that she should try this new service, this new artificial intelligence thing that can recreate deceased loved ones by gathering data on the internet about them,
Right.
the videos on Facebook and the posts and the pictures and the things you liked. And then you can create this AI so that you can interact with someone even though they've died. Berto, what do you think about this tech? What's your evaluation of this tech?
So obviously they're extrapolating to the nth degree, but in principle, you could absolutely model, someone from enough data about them. And the problem is that they wouldn't really have enough data just from what they would have at that point. But
well, you'd have to have the baseline technology of creating an artificial intelligence that can relate as a human to another human.
yeah, I'm sort of taking that for granted, which I know is unfair. But I was saying, assuming you could create something that feels human, making them imitate someone, the more you know the person, the harder it's going to be. But the more superficial your understanding of that person, the more you could do it.
Yeah.
But
the way they did it in the episode was he wasn't like, remember that time when we went on it was just done with his, like it starts off with she's just emailing.
Yeah.
And then they go to like texting essentially, or messaging. And so there's no voice inflection, and there's not even a lot of personality. It's just it's almost like my guess is, if I was to extrapolate here, this company has like 1,000 different personalities, because how many different personalities are there really in terms of messaging with somebody?
Yeah.
And then from the stuff they found on the internet, they were like, well, he probably, because he's a snarky, nerdy, likes to be funny,
Yep.
never serious really kind of guy.
Yep.
And so they probably just chose that personality and then added a few details about that they could gather from Facebook and stuff. And then
yeah,
there you go.
that's certainly how they would do it in general, because what you would do is you would train a model using everyone's data, and you would train a model with n number of variants, because you would say, okay, vary it based on this demographic, vary it based on this sort of devices they might use, et cetera, and you'd have a whole bunch of variants. And then you would say, okay, now modify the model slightly based on the specific person's history of chatting, and then there's your result. So yeah, you would start sort of from a derived template and then maybe modify it slightly. And the great thing about that is that on chat, you could sort of get away with it, especially if you don't really know the person that well. The girlfriend could break down, right? But if you don't know someone that well, it could be hard for you to detect it's not them chatting with you, assuming that it has human level of interaction,
Right, because you're projecting. You want it to be that person.
That's right.
And you see, and there's a picture. The profile picture is her deceased partner, and it's reacting to her as if it almost be like. And this is, I guess, another question. You could hire someone who could just act like them by messaging you, and like get a character actor or a improv actor, and they just pull everything from Facebook, and they're like, okay, I kind of know this guy, and I could probably get him in chat, because it's not hard to imitate someone over chat.
In fact, the only reason you wouldn't do such a business model would be really the liability of the emotional damage you could inflict.
Right. But if it's voluntary and there's a signing. So she starts to do this thing, and I loved in the episode her reaction. Right. Every step of the way. I always hate it in movies or TV shows when people just like jump right in, because the writer is like, well, eventually I want to get them to this point, and so let's just go, But every step of the way, she is resisting, she's like, what the hell, and then she does it, and you can just feel her, oh my God, am I interacting? No, I'm not interacting with him, and then let me ask you, Berto, if you were her and your partner died, would you choose to interact?
I'm her.
You're
in this
her.
case. Yeah, if I'm her, I would just start exploring my body because now I'm a female, and I would. No, just kidding. Yeah, basically, it would be really hard that even though you know logically what's happening, it'd be really hard not to get super emotional about it.
Totally.
Because you would sit there and you're like, I know what this is. But actually, here's the case in point. How many of us don't anthropomorphize random things like little teddy bears, little stuff, and we feel bad for those things. And we know 100% they're not real. There's no consciousness there, nothing.
Totally.
Let alone a chat where you have the picture of your deceased one.
Yeah.
They're sort of sounding like them. And you want it to be real. There's a part of you really wants it to be real. Oh, of course, it would be extremely emotional.
Yeah. People go to the gravestone
Absolutely.
and talk
Yeah.
and feel as though they're being answered.
Yeah.
And imagine if an AI could intuit and learn from other experiences and even experiences with you what
right.
you tend to respond well to. But would you do it if you were in her shoes? Would you, you're mourning, you've
Yeah.
lost your partner, they're gone.
Yep.
Would you say, yeah, I want this service because it makes me feel good? Or would you look at it and go like, this is stupid, it's not the real person?
Well, I would definitely not say this is stupid, but I think knowing what I know now about sort of mental health and my own mental health and stuff like that, I think I would be very wary of trying that because I would be afraid it would actually not help me heal from the real loss.
Yeah.
But that's because I'm sort of like more aware of those kinds of things. I think if I were a younger person, I would jump at the opportunity.
How would it interfere with your mental health?
Well, because there is this aspect of, okay, and then of course we have to pretend for a second that it is a great tech, but that it's not actually recreating the consciousness of the deceased person, right?
Wow.
So assuming that's the case,
Well-
I'm just saying, let's assume for a second, because we can consider both aspects. Assuming for a second that it's just really impressive tech, but it's
That's
in
the
no
way
way
they portrayed it. The way they portrayed it was the AI was good,
Yeah.
but it was not.
right.
Like if you lined up 5 of these AIs
Yep.
and then 5 real people, you could probably suss out which one was not a real person.
Let me put it this way. It'd be hard enough if you could. So let me go to the other extreme for a second. Imagine we now have the tech to sort of put together a human-looking human with human consciousness that recreates the consciousness of the previous biological deceased person. So that already would be pretty hard because on the one hand, they are now a fully conscious being. So they should have rights and protections. And now if you talk to them, they're fully conscious. You're fully having a conversation. They're emotional. They have the n amount of the memories of the other person. So it's really like that person. But at the same time, you know that, well, it is a different instance of that kind of pattern. The pattern I was in love with is still a little different. And the biological version of it is definitely gone. So you would already have this process that you have to go through of like, well, I want to love this person and they love me, so maybe we should have a life together. But it'd be hard, you'd have to like navigate
But
all these
would
problems.
you do it? That's my question.
Well, what I'm trying to
it seems
say,
like you're avoiding the question.
no, I already answered the question to start with. I said,
what'd you say?
But that's not the case we're talking about. We're talking about this other case where it's advanced tech. And I said I wouldn't. I already said I wouldn't.
You wouldn't.
Because it would not help me heal from the actual loss.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Yeah.
I got lost there.
Yeah.
Let me.
What I was trying to explain was simply that if it were, on the other hand, a super actual recreation of a human, that would make it a lot harder because then you're like, well, there is a new version of this person. I know it's not the exact same molecules, but it's the same pattern or very similar pattern. Should I not continue to interact with that human being? And that, I think, is where it would get really difficult for people.
So yeah, they eventually start talking on the phone instead of messaging, and she really bonds with the AI. She eventually buys a body for the AI, and I love how they made the body. I could tell the writers were like, okay, we're really being silly at this point, because how in the world are gonna make this work?
You got to pour this thing in.
Right. So this like mess of limbs and torsos comes in the mail, and you put it in the bathtub with warm water, and then you put in electrolytes and enzymes,
right?
And then this body like emerges.
It's a science experiment,
right? Because if they were really trying to take it super seriously,
right.
Because presumably there's an office nearby that could have done the
assembled all that stuff.
And then it just could have walked up. You know what I mean? But they made it kind of funny in that, it's like...
It works better that way for the show.
Right.
Because it also kind of gives you that sense of the grotesque. Because it points out how, on the one hand, we're just like this collection of molecules and things. So it's like, yeah, well, what's the big deal? You got a torso, you got a foot. Yeah. Put it all together. The hip bone connects to the torso bone.
Yeah, and they show her reaction to his body again because every step of the way,
right?
It's well depicted, and then they have sex, and it's much better. He's much better in bed, and partially because he's a robot and he can make himself hard for as long as he wants to, and he has unlimited energy.
That's right.
But also, he doesn't know from Facebook what he was like in bed.
That's true.
So if the guy would have posted more negative things about his sexual performance,
so they have to have like their default, pretty good sex setting,
right? And just think about that. Like, if this tech really existed in the future,
right?
How many people would just get one of these things?
Of course,
yeah.
Actually, I say of course. On the one hand, today, for example, we have those real dolls, right? The ones they make that are super hyper realistic.
Yeah.
But there's two aspects about it why so many people don't get them. One, it's very expensive. It's like $5,000 or something. Two, it's very stigmatized to do something like that. Like, imagine you go to someone's house and there's a real doll sitting there.
Right.
It's a little odd.
Right. And they did that in this movie too, or in this show. She was not proud of it. She I don't, according to the story, never really revealed it to anybody.
Right.
Now, as the story progresses, she starts getting into fights with the AI, and the AI doesn't really fight back. The robot is totally subservient, and you can sense her confusion and her anger that the robot isn't really her husband.
Yeah, because it's got no goals of its own other than to just imitate the husband.
Right. And it doesn't have the full range of humanity. It's not selfish is the thing. Like her husband, her boyfriend was selfish. He was on his phone all the time and wouldn't listen to her. Whereas this AI doesn't have that it's not at that level of consciousness, so we speak. It's more responsive to her. And in this way, it again, I felt like they were writing. They could have been so dumb with this show, as so many of these shows are, but I felt like it was extremely consistent with the AI.
Yeah.
Like the AI never blossomed into some fully realized version of her spouse.
Yeah, they basically made some magical leaps, but then kept that consistency after that.
Right. And she takes the robot to a cliff and tells him to jump off. He says, okay. And then she's like, ugh, my husband never would have said that. He would have been scared. And then he goes, oh, don't make me jump. He turns on he turns on the scared
module.
Yeah. What did you think about this scene, Berto?
Yeah, it's interesting because on the one hand, it would be actually very trivial to include self-preservation in an AI, because you already have self-preservation in anytime you play Grand Theft Auto, for example. All those little AI bots
are trying to run away from you.
They're trying to run away. They already have self-preservation routines. Not only that, it would make a lot of sense when you're actually starting to build a real organism, even a robotic one with metal parts and stuff like that. You need all sorts of sensors, because what's the point of our sensors when we sense heat, pain, all these things? It's not just for the fun of it. It's so that we actually know when something bad is happening to one of our limbs or something. You need that in a robot, because otherwise, forget the emotional part of it. They will destroy themselves easily.
Well, but the AI would not be destroyed if the body was destroyed.
Depends how the AI is built in, right? Because if this thing falls from a big height, whatever CPU, whatever computer it's got could easily get shattered and crushed.
But they even sort of addressed that earlier on because she almost broke her phone.
Yeah.
And then she was, or some device she had, and she was really worried that she had destroyed him.
Okay, fair enough. Like so if he's backed up and they're constantly recording every of the new experiences, yeah, great. So the AI is not, or the consciousness is not destroyed, but it's still an expensive piece of equipment, right?
Yeah.
So I just think that, but the idea that it would be totally disposable bodies would be
the administrator, which is her.
Yeah.
Gets to say whatever it should do, right? I mean, that it's an object. It's not.
I guess you're right. If they've programmed it so that the human gets to override it to the extreme, yeah. I think what you're going to start running into way before that level of consciousness or persona, you would have already run into lawsuits where people are demanding rights for these creatures.
Yeah. But what do you think about this story bit about she's upset and she, goes, because there's a lot of interpretations, was she actually trying to kill this thing, or, what was her point?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So I do think that the sense I got was she was trying to elicit humanity out of this, what she considered a thing at that point.
I could see that.
And one of the most extreme ways to elicit humanity is the fear of death.
Right.
And so I think that was sort of the point of her being like, you'll even kill yourself mindlessly. Like,
right. Yeah. Yeah. So at this point, the story jumps forward a number of years. She's living alone with her daughter. That is actually she got pregnant from the guy just before he died.
Right.
And they reveal that the robot lives in the attic.
Yeah.
And on the daughter's birthday, I think she goes into the attic to talk with her robot daddy. And so what do you think about this part of the story?
Yeah, this is where I think in practice it would break down because my experience just with people getting attached to dogs, stuffed animals, cars, and things like that is that us humans, we are very capable of forming very emotionally intense, strong attachments to things that are way less than human. So something that looks, talks, and walks mostly like a human, unless you are sort of a bit monstrous, you're not going to be able to keep them so isolated and so detached from your life. And I think especially a little kid is absolutely going to start being like, no. Think about how attached a kid gets to a little ball, let alone a thing that looks and walks and talks like a dad.
So you're saying that the daughter would have wanted dad to
be more integrated? Absolutely. It would have felt like, in fact, since she wasn't allowed, I think she's traumatized at this point.
Yeah, it's really messing her up. Yeah, interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
Imagine if in reality, your dad was kept in the attic for real.
Well, if you understood that it was AI and it was just like a fancy device.
But you're a little kid to start with. So
yeah, I guess totally. But, I could see it working out if you cognitively got it, especially if you were, because when she goes upstairs, the dad isn't like, let me out of here.
Yeah.
He's just totally pleasant. And, like the mom could have been like, look, don't ever give the impression to the daughter that you're sad.
Right.
Always say that you like being up there and you like visiting every now and then, but you don't want to, and every now and then you have to turn off or something, like I could imagine if you worked it right, the kid wouldn't be too traumatized by it. But that is a good point that she'd be like, I want to go up and see dad all the time,
Yeah.
But it is so interesting that they added that bit on, because it's like when they did it, I was like, oh, that makes total sense. That if someone was in that position and they had kind of it's sort of like when we have pictures and videos of our loved ones and we look at them.
Yep.
You could say a similar thing to that. It's like, why are you watching these old things? Let it go, so to speak, which of course is not healthy always. You know, people hold on to losses usually, and it's a healthy thing. And so you could imagine saying like, well, I have this like super, as accurate as possible, like a kind of a version of this guy that I can maybe bounce things off him every once in a while and just and feel like I have a partner in life, or feel like I could just sort of pick his brain, like and reminisce for myself about what it was like to be with my ex. And I would love for my daughter to have kind of a life-size statue that talks and does stuff, so that she can have at least some connection to her dad, because she can interact with this thing, you know? And so in one hand, it's grotesque and potentially traumatizing, but on the other hand, it's akin to holding on to videos, you know? It's akin to sitting down your 5-year-old daughter and saying, watch this video of your dad. It's a similar thing, I think.
I will say also that we have this very, very interesting situation as humans where we take it for granted that being human is a privileged position in the universe. And that, of course, humans need and deserve freedom of movement, freedom of going where they want, freedom of living where they want, living sort of how they want. Unless you're killing other humans, sort of, unless you're really infringing on their rights, you're generally free. And of course, humans have that right. And we also have this sense of like, of course, humans should not be slaves. You know, they should be free and they should have self-authority. But we are completely okay enslaving other creatures, right? Completely. And so I see absolutely at first there would be a lot of us that would be like, well, it's just a robot and stuff like that. But the closer that just a robot starts getting to where like someone can point out, well, you know, they feel pain. It's like, well, yeah, but it's robot pain. It's like, well, we are just having quote unquote robot pain too. Like you'll start getting to that really uncanny point of like, wait, why are they enslaved? How can we justify that enslavement?
Well, and the slaves will have slaves too, because you'll say, you're the head slave and I need you to take
You're
care
the house slave.
Yeah.
And then you'll have aliens come down that are way more advanced than us, and they'll put us as their little pets and we'll be outraged. They're like, what do you mean outraged? We're way more advanced than you guys.
The bottom line of this episode for me is it's a wonderful story about grief. I mean, that's the central feature of this story. I mean, you can look at the AI and all this stuff, but it's highly focused on the human experience of grief, how hard it is, how messy it is, how we want to hold on, how it's not necessarily unhealthy to hold on, how it's hard when someone is suddenly ripped away from us, and how we will go to a lot of lengths to get that back. Other things that they didn't really get into is you could make an AI of someone that's currently alive if you wanted to. You could make an AI of yourself or a famous person, and then you could have like Brad Pitt walking around in your house potentially, or a parent. You could make them more attentive and loving and have like therapy essentially with a parent who wasn't really there, or someone you hate and then you could abuse them, or you know, or you could make 10 versions of yourself and you could have like, you know, a whole bunch of yous, and you just tell that person, okay, I want you to go to work and like work the cash register, because it's not hard to do that.
That's right. And there's really dark things too, because you could think of all the sexual abuse that could take place.
Yeah.
You could technically make kids in this process, and then abuse them.
Right. So it's similar to Westworld in this way. Yeah. And they never really went into that, of course. Yeah. But that's that. All right, let's take a break and then we'll get back. We'll talk about the next episode. What do you say, Berto?
Yep.
Okay, we're back. If you are not a patron yet, become a patron. It's how you support the show. It's how we finance this show. The 95% of the finances for the show that keeps us going are our patrons and the funds that come in through that. So if you like the show and you want it to continue and you want us to spend more time on this show, then please become a patron by going to patreon.com. That's patreon.com.
Patron. It's not just a type of tequila.
Patron. Episode 2, White Bear. Stars, I don't know the main woman's name, but I recognized the scrappy girl. Her name is Tuppence Middleton.
Tuppence.
Which is
a British name.
Which is the most Britishy British name I've ever heard.
Tuppence.
Tuppence. I mean, other than Cumberbatch, this one gets Tuppence gets the Cumberbatch Award for the most British name. Tuppence Middleton. She was in The Imitation Game, and she was in Jupiter Ascending. Did you ever see Jupiter Ascending?
No.
It's pretty good. I mean, it got hated, but it's fine. It's fine. It's entertaining.
Okay.
I appreciate the brothers for taking a risk because it's a very odd story.
Is it based on a book?
I think it is. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the plot of White Bear. A woman wakes up in an apartment. She's disoriented. She doesn't seem to remember who she is. She leaves the apartment to find other people. She starts walking around. She sees random people filming her with their cell phones from the windows of other apartments. It's super creepy. She cries out to them. She asks them for help and tells them that she doesn't know who she is. And the people just stare at her and they film her with their cell phones in silence. And then a man in a mask finds her and he gets a gun and starts to chase her and she runs from him and all the random people follow her still filming with their cell phones. She's terrified. At this point in this, as I'm watching this, I'm hating everyone except for this woman. I'm like, everyone sucks. I felt really bad for this woman. Did you feel bad?
Oh yeah, no, it was such a frustrating feeling. It's like, because, I immediately started thinking, okay, I kind of see maybe where they're going with this. But I'm like, oh my gosh, stop.
Yeah.
It reminded me of, immediately I was thinking of, was it The Greatest Game or whatever? The Edgar Allan Poe, where they're hunting humans. And anyways, it was really frustrating.
Yeah. The woman comes upon a young couple, Tuppence included. They're the only people who seemingly aren't filming her with their cell phones and they seem normal, but they try to get away from her, but she gets she kind of joins up with them. The three of them hide from the man with the gun. At this point, the story seems to be some sort of zombie movie, because you have three normal people and all these zombies with cell phones, and then this one guy with a gun. It seemed like the cell phone zombie movie or something.
I was more thinking at that point in the movie. I was thinking it was one of those lottery type movies where, to keep the society going, they have to sacrifice someone, that kind of thing.
The man with the gun kills the boyfriend, and the two women run away. The scrappy woman leads the other woman to safety. They go on a number of adventures together, running from the masked people, escaping capture. They're about to be killed by the masked people when she suddenly is thrusted onto a stage, and there's an audience watching the whole thing. The masked people take off their masks, and they bow on stage. A man straps her into a chair and tells her who she is. He tells her that she and her fiancé had kidnapped a little girl. They tortured and murdered the girl while the woman filmed it on her cell phone, and they were caught and convicted. And in court, the amnesic woman claimed she was only following her fiancé's orders. And this was actually a wrinkle in the story that when I watched it a second time, I didn't notice the first time. All the best Black Mirror episodes always have a question mark as to whether or not you should be on one side or the other.
Yeah.
And this is where it is, because they indicated she might have not been guilty because she testified in court that she was terrified of her fiancé,
right,
and was only going along with it because of him. And you've seen stories like that before.
Yeah. And not only is that, that's a good point to point that out, but they added the additional question of like, and granted, I know this part's a little magical, but if you can actually fully wipe someone's memory, are they still responsible for their previous personality?
Interesting. I hadn't thought about that. The fiancé he hangs himself in his cell, and the woman is given her sentence, and she is sentenced to go through the same thing the little girl went through before the little girl died. So they wipe her memory, and then they terrify her while people film her with cell phones instead of the opposite. They publicly humiliate her. They do this over and over again, several days, and at the end, they show them training all the random people how to create the show, which I thought was a really awesome device at the end of this episode, where they're like, okay, let's get out there and have fun, people.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was an interesting, because they could have just done it so where this only happened once, but it was still sort of horrifying. But instead, they were doing it over and over,
and it was implied that it would never end.
Yeah.
You know, what does this episode tell us about human nature, Berto?
Well, it's sort of like a black mirror held up to. Well, I think, we've seen through history that there is this desire for sort of what I would call the common man and woman to see others that are not themselves suffer. Schadenfreude or something like that it's called. Yeah. But also, like, you think of like a Roman Colosseum, or nowadays we see like people getting beat up either in sports or in other circumstances, the running of the bulls. There's a lot of things where a lot of humans like to watch other people being put in situations of stress and suffering.
Particularly if we think they deserve it.
Particularly, but not necessarily, but definitely if they do deserve it. Like, it's almost like now we fully get to enjoy it, because so that part was
like on a movie, like on a TV show like this, Survivor, people suffer, but we feel like they deserve it because they signed up for it and they could win something.
That's true.
Do you know
yeah.
what I mean?
So it's not just about them being mean. It's also that there was some trade there. That's true.
Right.
Well, and so in this case, on the one hand, you're ready to convict everyone for like, can't believe you guys are being entertained by this, but then you're like, oh, but she is so horrible, and so it presents a great question. It's like, if you're taking the universe at its face, you're like, well, what's the point of punishing someone? Like, it doesn't bring back the people they hurt. It doesn't, right? So you could really be like, no, we just need to stop them from continuing to do that.
Right.
But on the other hand, there's the natural human need for kind of setting things right and vengeance and things. And you could see a show like this or a thing like this really satiating that.
Right. Yeah. It's the classic debate as to whether or not the legal justice system in its sentencing is about rehabilitation, protecting the public, or revenge.
Yeah. And one aspect,
or deterrence for other people to do it,
Yeah, because you would almost have to say that in this case, it only serves the public's need for revenge and maybe the deterrent side.
Right.
Because she's not even herself anymore.
Right.
She's a constantly terrified victim.
Right. So if people watching this on TV, they're just like, man, I better not do anything bad because society is going to make me relive it in a horrifying way every day.
Then it's got this really difficult moral quandary, which is, wait a minute, she's mentally not the same person that did those things.
Which I hadn't even thought about. Yeah, I would say the same thing. I think what it says about human nature is we love revenge and we hate criminals. And we like to see criminals suffer. Not all of us, but I think in general we do. The prison system is not great, and I think a lot of people are like, well, that's what you get, And if you have a really cushy prison system, that's not super cushy, but it's like livable, then there's a public outcry. It's like, why are we spending so much money to make this system comfortable for these criminals? So I think we clearly have a desire to make people suffer and to get revenge on them for doing bad things. And another thing that it made me think about was that our current justice system is pretty limited. There's no creativity. I'm not saying we should have creativity, but there's, this is conceivable. Like, this is not in the future.
Right.
There was nothing about this that this could happen today.
Done it today.
Yeah. If we just wrote laws that allowed for this could happen today. And it would provide, it was a community gets together. So it's like providing community.
Right.
It also like teaches kids about, because there's kids involved, about morality and what happens to bad people who do bad things. But it's just interesting how our justice system pretty much just has one punishment and one reaction, which is put people in prison, right? And of course, there's variations to that. But this episode was like, oh, there's so many other things we could be doing, right? Well, I guess it is set in the future because they can wipe people's memory. That's the one thing.
Oh, that's right.
Is this justice, Berto? Is this justice?
No, I don't think so because, okay, so I've gone through back and forth on this throughout my life, but I'm definitely landed in a stable, what I think is a stable place. Personally, I've always had these fantasies in my head that if someone really did something terrible to someone I know or me, you know, I would spend the rest of my life doing vengeance upon them. And I mean, even to the point of thinking through, like, I will put them in my basement and I will slowly torture them. 7 has got nothing on what I would do to these people, right? But, and then my thinking was like, because they just can't get away with this. They gotta, like, you know, right? And then as I grew up, I was like, sort of on the one hand, saw the meaninglessness of it all. I was like, but what's the point? It only makes my life worse because now my life is only about revenge and hurt and pain. I can never heal. They don't, you know, they don't bring back, they don't reform or change. And the wounded people or the people that were hurt, this doesn't undo any of that. And then, so eventually I landed in the sort of this kind of pragmatic view of the world, which is, look, we live in a weird universe, and only weird by our standards. It is what it is. But in that, bad, really horrible things from our perspective can happen all the time. And humans can do really horrible things to other humans. That is very hard to deal with as humans. But 2 things that I take is, 1, I don't want to be part of the problem, right? I don't want to inflict horrible things onto humans. And 2, since it doesn't actually help bring back or even reform, and statistics show that it doesn't even really help with prevention, right? Horrible punishment doesn't really help with prevention. Then I'm like, yeah, I think the main points are stop dangerous people from being dangerous and hurting others, right? And 2, look at the ways that it works around the world that it might work better, like, you know, other systems that might use different approaches to reforming that actually have better success rates. So no, I think this kind of approach is not moral by our human morality standards, and it is not useful to it is not just. Let me put it that way.
When you were watching it, were you thinking those things?
I don't remember exactly, but I definitely was. You know, and honestly, since you don't really realize till what's happening till towards the end,
yeah.
I was thinking more of the episode. I was thinking that this is one of those sacrifice one for the benefit of the many, which I also think is not morally right either.
Oh.
Yeah, like this is a really hard question, which is not a real question. Like this would never actually happen, but it's the theoretical. You know, the alien race comes down and says, we're going to wipe all of humanity unless you torture and kill this little girl right here, right? And this is a hard one because you're saying if you decide to do the morally right thing to not torture and kill that little girl, they will wipe all of humanity. So what do you do? But in reality, actually, it's in my mind, it's perfectly fine and reasonable to say, no, we're absolutely not torturing that little girl. It's really sad and horrific that sucks to be us that this alien race came down and now is going to exterminate us, but we're not going to be part of the problem. That's where I land on that. So to me, this sort of solution to a crime is being part of the problem, is making our society.
And you thought that as you were watching it.
No. I while I was watching it, the part that I thought was, if this is one of those sacrifice the one for the benefit of the many, I already had made up my mind that I don't agree with that approach.
Interesting.
Yeah.
When I was watching it, was totally on the side of the protagonist until it was revealed that she was a criminal, and then I was totally on the board with the community. I was like, yeah, let her have it.
Yeah.
Looking back at it, it's just like, I don't really know, but I thought, yeah, if she did all those horrible things, if that's true, then this is, in a sense, it's sort of justice.
Yeah, I see it as not just. Not only do I see it as not justice, but if you picture the kids that are seeing this, you know the message they're taking from it could be, ooh, I better not mess up because, man, I'm going to be tortured forever and stuff. But at the same time, it is also sending a message about what kind of society they actually live in, which is, it is a brutal society that will take day after day to torture someone that doesn't even remember who they are anymore because of some other horrible thing that happened. And that is not a society I would like to live in.
And we have to move on to the next episode, but in a sense, that's what we're doing already. I mean, when someone does a bad thing,
I know.
we make them stew in a very small cell.
Yeah, we don't have a great system already.
Yeah. And the effort of actual rehabilitation is, debatably and arguably not existing.
And by the way, just to wrap that up, like what will seem maybe monstrous and inconsistent, but in my mind it's consistent, is that I would rather put someone to death if they did something horrible and we feel like they're not really, we can't rehabilitate them and stuff, they're a risk to society. I'd rather quickly and humanely putting them to death than torturing them for 100 years.
And I'm just realizing as I'm talking, I didn't really know that we were going to talk about this in particular, and I haven't given it much thought. And of course, I'm not an expert on it, but the more I talk about it with you, the more I realize that there's a lot of questions here, and there's no easy answers in my head. All right, episode number 3, the Waldo experiment. The people in this movie, or in this episode, I call them movies because they feel like little movies.
Yeah, they are.
The biggest star is Jason Fleming. He plays Jack Napier, the producer, the sort of evil producer guy.
Right.
And he's been in all sorts of things, including Snatch, which we saw last night.
Yes!
We saw Snatch last night in the theater at Central Cinema. But I remember him from Rob Roy with Liam Neeson. He was in Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels.
Right.
He was in Red Violin, Snatch, From Hell, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which he was Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. He was in Layer Cake, Stardust, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, Clash of the Titans, Kick-Ass, The Social Network, X-Men First Class, Hannah, Great Expectations, and of course, Black Mirror. The guy who plays the Liam Monroe, the politician, is Tobias Menzies, which is an unfortunate last name. He was in Casino Royale, Atonement as
Wait, who is he in Casino Royale?
He was Villiers M's assistant. So he's M's assistant. He was, but his big role as Game of Thrones, he plays Edmure Tully.
Yeah.
And he's in Underworld as well. Okay, the plot. It's in the near future. But let me ask you, Berto, can we do this sort of thing today? Can we make a little Waldo the way that they were making it? You know how he was like a puppet,
right,
making Waldo. Can we do that now? Is that something that we're capable of?
Not quite.
Not because we don't have that. I mean, it seems like we could, like the tech. You just have to make a puppet, because essentially there's this digital puppet that this guy puppeteers, and as he talks, the puppet reads his mouth, or he's puppeting the mouth with his hand.
So here's what you can do today. And so maybe the answer is almost yes, but I think
no one's made it yet.
The pieces are maybe there, but it's certainly like the system. There's been no such system yet. But for example, there is the tech to grabbing let's say you can grab a famous person's face like Arnold, and then you can video yourself saying stuff, and then it will now use Arnold's face, but move his face to make it look like they're saying
there's
what you're saying.
There's a lot of Snapchat things like this. Yeah.
And there are definitely a lot of aspects that I think you could maybe assemble something like this.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah, I feel like no one's made it yet.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's absolutely possible to make something like this today. It seemed to me anyway. This episode is a cynical or perhaps accurate story about the current state of politics. Again, this is 2013, so this is before Brexit, before Trump.
Very, very apropos though.
Prescient.
Yeah.
It's basically you have two political figures are running for seemingly local office. It's not like a national office. It's like a local office in Britain somewhere. And the story begins on the set of a TV show. It's some sort of comedy show like the Jimmy Kimmel Show or something. And they have a cartoon character named Waldo, which is sort of like Triumph from Conan O'Brien, the insult comic dog. It's sort of like that. And so Waldo walks around, makes fun of people. And there's a politician who's leading, Mr. Monroe's Edmure Tully. He keeps trying to have thoughtful conversations about issues, but Waldo keeps interfering and reducing the conversations to jokes about penises and other stupid things. And the public loves Waldo and his antics. And all the silliness that Waldo creates drowns out any thoughtful conversation that the politicians are trying to have. As Waldo gains popularity, the guy who puppets Waldo starts to make more poignant criticism of the politicians, and the crowd starts to not only think he's funny, but also respect Waldo, and the crowd turns on the politicians. And the public calls for Waldo to run for office. In the end, Monroe wins, the main politician, the incumbent politician wins, but the crowds are very angry. There's a certain Waldo contingent that is very angry and called to violence, and you can see like the political system is starting to crumble.
Right.
We fast forward in time. Waldo has seemingly taken over the entire world, and China, India. Everyone loves him. It's a police state in Britain, and people are disempowered by fascism, essentially. What does this episode tell us about human nature, Berto?
It tells us that there's no way on earth we would elect a Waldo-like character who was being oh damn it, we already did it.
Yeah, there were several news reports that compared the 2016 Trump political campaign to this episode. On the election night in the United States, when it seemed like Trump was going to win, Black Mirror sent out a tweet that said, "This isn't an episode. This isn't marketing. This is reality."
Yeah, wow. Okay, so on the one hand, earlier we were talking about how it is so easy for humans to anthropomorphize stuff and get really attached to it. And this is one of those examples where like they sort of start like really relating to this character.
Yeah, they actually put him on the ticket to run for office. He becomes a third political figure.
That's right.
And he almost wins.
That's right.
And then eventually he does win.
And people sort of start feeling and believing like he's a real thing in and of itself, you know? And do I remember right? Doesn't the actor start having second thoughts about all this? And
the actor, the guy the puppet master, pretty much hates this character from the start. He's really good at it, and it's his job, but he's super ambivalent. And in the end, he quits, and the producer takes over. The cynical producer takes over.
Yeah, and he's thinking like, and that was another interesting thing. It's there's this impression. It's like, well, I created the character, like you need me, but it's nope. The character takes a life of its own. And
so do you think that this is a satire about Trump ultimately?
Well, I know that it wasn't intended like that because that was way before the time. I do think that it is, what it is a satire is, it's basically saying, look, if we're not careful, humans can be easily manipulated and swayed by things that seem superficially appealing. And that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
So I almost now, I think if you had asked me maybe a year and a half ago, I would have said, but it's a total exaggeration. I'm now not so sure that it is. Like, I almost could see a freaking cartoon entity running and sort of winning in a situation, like maybe at least at a local level. Like, it just seems like now I'm not so sure. I made a post on Facebook last night because I made the mistake of going into one of those political posts, like fake news things, and I made the mistake of looking through the comment section, and it felt like a black hole, like something you can barely pull out of, and it just grows and grows on its own, and it feeds on itself. And there is no arguing or logicking or anything. It's just people with their emotional outbursts. And so seeing that, I'm like, well, I don't know, maybe it is possible, in fact, to elect a cartoon character.
Right. But just to be, and you answered the question, but I want to ask sort of a follow-up question. Do you think that this is direct? I mean, of course, it wasn't intended this way, but
is it directly applicable to the current situation?
To Trump?
Oh, yeah. That's interesting. I think in some ways, it actually minimizes. If if we fully just do that, it's like, yeah, this is basically he's a cartoon character, which is tempting to do and say. I think it does minimize the reality of the situation, and also one thing that it definitely does is it alienates anyone who is supporting him, and so it absolutely closes the door on any conversation about well, can we talk about the policies? Can we talk about the decisions and things? So simply saying like, yes, this is basically that Black Mirror episode. He is a cartoon character is very tempting, but it's too superficial, I think.
Yeah, I personally, as I was watching it, I was thinking, this is interesting how it is kind of like Trump in that Trump was saying just a lot of inflammatory things, or seemingly anyway. Seemingly. And it also portrays how the masses can, as you were saying, be manipulated. Yeah. Or I don't know. If you're against the political figure, it's a manipulation. If you're for the political figure, then it's a movement, right? Yeah. So, but to me, this is not a satire of Trump. It's a satire of political shows, comedy shows, actually, like The Daily Show, Colbert, Bill O'Reilly, Alex Jones. On both sides, we have these extremely popular, if not more popular than the actual politicians, these comedy political shows. Right. Our political system has, in my opinion, has been completely taken over by this element. Yeah. The average person, I'm just going to take a guess just based on anecdotal evidence. The average person gets 99 or more percentage of their political knowledge from comedy, from Saturday Night Live, from The Daily Show, from Jimmy Kimmel or stuff online or memes or something.
And comedy, and also vast caricature and exaggeration type articles.
Yeah, or Alex Jones, which you can essentially just blowhards, people that are trying to entertain through exaggeration or through humor or through anger or they're through hatred of the other side. And all of them on both sides tend to create content so their base will react either with laughter or with anger or something. And each side is making fun of the political figures rather than focusing on the issues.
That's right.
Meanwhile, the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer, regardless of who's in office. I just want to point that out. With Obama being president, the rich kept getting richer and the poor just kept getting poorer. That's right. Now, I don't blame Colbert or Bill O'Reilly or Alex Jones. I don't blame them at all. They're just people trying to have a career. What I do blame is the people for not recognizing what's happening. That's what I think this episode points to me, is that people have to realize that politics are an actual real thing, in that people are actually, when we vote them in the office, they make choices that impact our lives. And the only way we're going to come together as a nation, and the only way we're going to actually change things, is if we try to work together and try to understand each other and try to address everyone's wishes, which I think is possible in a lot of ways. I mean, on the hot button issues, not, if someone wants to outlaw abortion and another person doesn't, you're not going to see eye to eye on that. But if we're going to say, let's try to help people who are in need, I think most people, anyway, I'm not going to go down this road. But my point is that this episode, to me, is a satire of everybody. Everyone who gets whipped up into a frenzy and essentially loses they become so dislodged from the foundation of let's work together, and they become so they just fly into the stratosphere of anger and laughter and making fun and caricature, and that we lose the ability to actually talk and work on things. And this episode shows that to me. Yeah, it basically ends the debate. That's what Waldo did. Is he came in and he just, now you can make an argument that there was never a debate anyway, and that politicians are just saying things to get by. Yeah. But at least there was some semblance of like a debate. There was some semblance of, well, how are we going to cut the deficit, and what are we going to do with immigration? And, let's try to work together on this. And Waldo just comes in and just says all these terrible things and but says nothing ultimately, other than politicians are assholes. And this completely dismantles the system so that you essentially need a dictator like a fascist state to run the situation.
Right.
Which is what's happening kind of in our system right now. And I blame everybody for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you were saying you don't necessarily blame the hosts of some of these things, but I do actually blame some of them, or at least to some extent, because one of the problems is that in the Bill Clinton era, I don't have the context of having been alive for 100 years and really telling you what politics was like 80 years ago or anything, right? But just, Bill Clinton era was when I first started kind of paying attention to politics a bit, right? And he had all his scandals, scandals this and scandal that, and Monica Lewinsky and all these things. The thing I remember hearing, because I used to listen to a lot of right-wing stuff, like Rush Limbaugh and Michael Medved and all these guys, because in my mind, I was sort of like, well, let's see what the other side has to say, I would have heard things like, they're corrupt, these people need to be thrown out of office, stuff like that, right? Like, and strong statements and things. What I never used to hear were things like, I think he smells like sulfur. I think his wife is a man. I think he's not from this country. I think not only is he not from this country, I think he's a Satanist. Like, those are the things that I didn't used to hear. And not even about Bush, right? I think Obama sort of like triggered a new kind of frenzy in people, at least one segment, that became fed by some of these extreme conspiracy theorists like Alex Jones, who would literally throw out things like, some people have said that they've smelled sulfur. I'm just saying that and then so people started saying, he's going to confiscate all our guns. He's going to put us in hobbit homes. He's going to round us up FEMA. He's going to declare martial law. He's not from this country. He's a Muslim. He's a Satanist, right?
Let's take a break. And when we get back, we'll talk about the last episode in season 2.
Yep.
Okay, we're back. Last episode, season 2, Black Mirror. Probably my favorite episode. And it was actually not technically season 2. It was made like a while later. It was like a one-off, but they consider it season 2. But we're going to talk about episode 4, White Christmas, starring John Hamm from Mad Men and other things. And it also stars Rafe Spall. I think I'm pronouncing his name right. British guy. He was in Prometheus. He was one of the doofuses who gets eaten by the snake thing.
Right.
He was in Life of Pi, which I don't remember him being in, and he was in The Big Short. And Greta, the woman who has the bean taken out of her head, and the AI character, played by Una Chaplin. Do you remember what she's been in before? She was Robb Stark's wife.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Queen of the North.
Yes.
Okay, the plot. Now, I'm going to say it in chronological order, not the order it's presented, because in the episode, it lays it out in a non-chronological order so that it's more interesting, but I'm going to lay it out chronologically.
By the way, this is my favorite episode.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Of the entire series, or?
Yeah, I think so. No, I think it's...
It's so good. It has all the elements, and I think it's really long, too.
It is. It's extra long.
John Hamm actually approached Black Mirror and was like, can I be in this show? And then Black Mirror people were like, John Hamm?
Please.
Yeah, we'll work him in. And then that's why they worked in some American lines in this.
Yeah.
Because they're like, oh, well, you have an American actor.
Okay.
Anyway. John Hamm is working at a job, and we see a woman just before surgery. And as she goes under, she blacks out, and then a marble is pulled out of her head. A very small little marble. And the marble has consciousness. And this marble can see herself in the mirror, and she's this little metal marble, and she's terrified. She's like, what's happening? What's happening? I can't move. And John Hamm interacts with this marble, and his job is to help her adjust to her reality. And he tells her that she's a copy of the woman she was pulled out of. He explains that they put this marble into the person just under the skin by the brain, and the marble slowly absorbs the personality of the host and all their memories. And this creates an AI that is exactly like the host. But when they pull the marble out, the AI doesn't realize that it's AI. Right. So she doesn't realize she's a copy. She thinks she's the woman, and she's been transformed into this marble, when in fact the woman is walking around.
Right.
And Ham tells her that it's her job to run the house like an Amazon Echo or something, right? Or Alexa or Google thing. Is that Alexa, Google?
No, Alexa is not Google. Google's got Google Home.
Okay. Well,
Alexa is still Amazon.
Okay. So Echo is Alexa.
Echo is the name of the device.
Okay. So she rebels and she refuses to do her job. She's like, screw you guys. I'm not going to be your little slave. This is bullshit. I want to be free. And Ham punishes her by making her sit in an empty room for 3 weeks with nothing to do and nothing to look at. And that only lasts a few seconds for him. He just presses this button and 3 weeks go by for her. And I love this plot device. Did you like it, Berto?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's a viable. This is the genius of Black Mirror. Is they take a premise and they come up with a completely new angle on it that feels naturalistic. Yep. It feels like, oh yeah, sure, that's what you would do.
Yeah, if they now have the digital capability of simulating a person's experience, and they have enough processing power to where they can accelerate the time flow, of course,
right. And she still refuses, and he's like, okay, I'll give you 6 months. And she
starts going crazy.
She's sitting in this room for 6 months with nothing to do.
Yep.
Nothing. She can't sleep. No daytime. No nighttime.
Right.
She's just in this white room, 6 months. So that about a minute goes by, and then he's like, "Okay, how you doing?" And she's like, "I'll do anything. I'll do anything. Don't make me go through that again." And so he's like, "Okay." And just then, the real woman enters the kitchen, because that's where Ham is. He's talking to this AI in the kitchen. And they show the AI figure doing everything for her master, which is her.
Right.
And turning on the alarm, turning on the music, making toast, just because that's the idea is only
yourself.
Only you know how you like your toast. Right. Only you know what music you like. And so instead of asking Alexa to do something for you, if you just had you in Alexa, then Alexa would do it for you prior to you knowing what you needed.
Talk about total over-engineering for something, and also how it would quickly go bad because you're like, that's not what I wanted today. Right. What are you doing?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's sort of, this is the one problem with this episode. The one plot problem is that, it's to create an AI it's
fully you,
like 100% you. It's not just like all you would really need is like 1% you. It would just have to learn your preferences.
And certainly you don't need it to actually be fully conscious, aware, and be tortured.
Right, because she doesn't interact with she's not like, hey, mini-me.
Right.
The mini-me just runs everything from the background the way that another automated system might. And so
if presumably the psychology was still all the same, then you're immediately not only not you anymore because you're now branching, but now one of you is a tortured, traumatized individual trying to sort of run another person.
Who has revenge on the mind,
of course,
and could kill you.
Yeah.
And so
but I still loved the premise.
Okay. So John Hamm, we fast forward to another scene in the storyline. And John Hamm, as a hobby, he helps nerds meet women at night.
Oh, right.
So after his regular job of like acclimating AIs to be slaves to their biggie me's, at nighttime he helps. He as a service he helps nerds meet women. And it wasn't clear if he was being hired to do it or if he was just doing it for fun. And he's at home, and on his computer he sees everything that the nerd can see and hear. Right. So apparently there's a camera in the eyeball of some sort. And so as the nerd is walking around this party, and I say nerd lightly because he's not really a nerd.
He's just an insecure,
Yeah, he's
not
just
quite, yeah.
Yeah, he's just insecure.
By the way, really quick pause. All this stuff you've been describing, and to think how the episode actually started,
Right.
like it's so crazy.
Right. Yeah. Starts with these two guys in this cabin.
Stark,
Yeah.
wintry scene.
You're just like, what is happening? Yeah. And so he coaches the nerd how to meet women, and it's this really interesting scene because he's can hear him. So he's like, ask her about her, her hobbies, or he's like giving him good advice, and the nerd is like, meeting this girl. And the woman, do you know who the woman in this is?
I forgot.
And she's another Game of Thrones person. She plays Bran's wilding friend,
yes.
Osha.
Oh, of course, from Harry Potter.
Okay. And
Right? She's the one from...
I don't remember Harry Potter. Okay. Those movies kind of escape me. But the nerd gets murdered by Osha, by the woman in the end, right? You're looking at me funny.
No. I'm just trying to remember if it's the... But go ahead.
Yeah. The nerd gets murdered in this story, and Ham is watching this whole thing unfold, and Ham realizes that he's in big trouble because he was involved in this murder.
Right.
And it's apparently illegal to do this sort of work, which doesn't make a lot of sense. Maybe because it's like invasion of privacy for other people. But
I can see that.
Anyway, he tries to cover it up, but he gets caught by the cops and convicted of not only doing this kind of work in terms of, hacking into or working with people to like blah, blah, blah. Just trying to think, like, what law is it that, how would they word that? Like, it's
I think
harmful.
It could be like an espionage thing, like how, I don't know, but it seems like they would probably do it around you're violating someone else's privacy, Yeah. The other thing, who knows if these devices, these things
are even legal to begin with.
Yeah, they might have negative effects health-wise to the person.
Right. Yeah, I guess it would be kind of voyeuristic if you're having sex with someone and like at least
that's
one
true.
person was watching. That wouldn't be fair, right? That's okay. True. So he gets caught and he's also involved in trying to cover up a murder and obstructing justice essentially that way. And to reduce his sentence, John Hamm, he agrees to help the police with a suspect in another murder.
That's right.
Which brings us to the next part of our story, Joe. He's in a happy relationship with Beth. This is a completely different group of people here. Joe discovers that Beth is pregnant. Joe is really happy about it, but Beth is really upset about it. And we're not really quite sure what's going on. Joe doesn't know this for years, but the baby is not his. That becomes revealed later on. Their friend is actually the father. Their Asian friend is actually the father of the child. And Beth knows this and doesn't know what to do. So she's sitting there. Joe's like, oh my God, you're pregnant. This is so great. And Beth is like, oh my God, it's not your child.
Yep.
And I don't know what to do here. And so if she has the baby, Joe will find out and be upset. If she has an abortion, she'll feel terrible about it. And Joe will be upset about it. So, she's kind of in the heat of the moment. She's been drinking and he's upset. He's like, wait a second, you've been drinking all night and you've been and she blurts out that she wants an abortion, but she doesn't seem to be too sure about it because, she seems like she's in a, kind of a chaotic state. Yep. And they get into a big fight about the abortion, which you could totally imagine happening in that kind of situation.
Right.
And they're both drunk and that doesn't help. And she, at this point, becomes kind of exasperated. She's in a panic because she's like, this isn't his child.
Right.
He's going to find out that I've been cheating on him with our friend and I'm not even sure if I want this child and what am I doing? And in her panic, she blocks him.
Right.
And they use that term blocking, just like on Facebook, how you block some. And when you block someone in this world, because you have these cameras in your eyes, you can't see him anymore. Yeah. So he's just this staticky blob and you can't hear him. So when you block someone, so if Berto and I were in the same room and I blocked Berto, I would see like a fuzzy outline of him, but I couldn't see him anymore and I wouldn't be able to hear him. It would be all muffled and you couldn't see me.
That's right.
So if I block, we both can't see each other and we both can't hear each other. And
but others can see me and I can see others.
Right.
Yeah.
And every picture and every video is also blocked.
That's right.
The only way we can communicate is if we write something down and actually pass it, you know, which is really difficult to do, right?
Yeah.
So she blocks him. She blocks, Beth blocks her boyfriend because they're having this big fight. What do you think about this technology, Berto?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, let me say again, another reason why I love this episode. It's so layered. There's so many things. Like this could have been, that alone could have been its own, episode. It's crazy. That's absolutely, some version of that is already here and is fully coming. Like we already have the capability of digitally blocking people in social, networks and things. As soon as we have devices that are like augmented reality devices, like you're wearing glasses that can project stuff, you can imagine modifying what you see on a constant basis.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. So now, of course, that presumes that these would have a full range of vision, so you can, no matter where the person is standing, they'd be blocked. But you can imagine, you don't even have to go to those extents at first, right? You could literally do something where it's not so much about blocking the person, but if they're coming close to you, you get alerted, and so you can always avoid them,
Yeah.
So I think it's a legit long-term idea,
Right.
that people would choose to do.
Right.
Now, it would have some really potentially dangerous side effects.
Yeah.
Imagine just visually the danger of having blobs in your field of view.
Yeah.
If you have many of them, you might not know that one of them's carrying a gun or one of them's trying to do you harm. And even if you're a blob to them, it doesn't matter. Like if I'm shooting, I'm shooting. So there's weird implications with that, but still fascinating.
Yeah. So she leaves him, and he is desperate to get her to turn off the block because he wants her back, and he doesn't understand why she's leaving him. It's like just over that little fight, I mean, come on. But she's leaving him, and they never explain this, but she might have been leaving him seemingly because she's like, well, I'm going to have this kid, and it's not this guy's kid, and how convenient it is that I just sort of block him, and so I don't have to deal with him.
Avoid.
And and so he kind of stalks her, and then she puts a restraining order on him, which means that he can't approach her, and they are all GPSed up, and so the authorities will be alerted automatically if his GPS is within a certain distance of her.
And isn't there something where, am I remembering right? Like the daughter also, he's blocked from the daughter too,
right? So
right?
when you block someone, your children are also blocked. Yeah,
which makes sense. It's like parental settings,
right? Exactly. Yeah. He randomly discovers that she did not have an abortion. He sees a tiny blocked blob, and like, oh my God, she had the kid. And so now Joe at this point has given up on reconciling with Beth. He's like, clearly she, restraining order, she hates me, but this is my child. He doesn't know that it's not his child, but he's, 100% convinced. And we as the viewer think it's his child too.
Yeah.
He spies on her and the baby. He can't see the child's face, and
so he doesn't know she's
she's Asian, half Asian.
That's such a clever thing to do.
Right. He's desperate to have contact with his daughter. He spies on them for years. He can't approach them, but he really wants to get updates on how his daughter is doing. But again, it's not his daughter, but he can't tell that because he's been blocked. About 6 years later, he sees on the news that Beth has died in a train accident, and the block dies with her. So he actually sees her face on TV, and because the block dies when the person dies. And so the block also dies on the daughter. So he sets out to contact his daughter. He can finally have contact with her and communicate with her. And he finds her playing alone at the grandfather's house. And she turns around and
she's Asian.
Half Asian face. Yeah. It's not his. And he's disoriented and distraught. Suddenly, his daughter is dead, essentially. Because for 6 years he's been interacting from afar with this blob, imagining what his daughter looks like.
Right.
And then this girl turns around and he's like, I finally can interact with my child. and it's not
your child.
his child. And so
But he's grown attached to the idea of it.
Right. And so his brain is like totally mush right now. And he, runs into the grandfather in this state, and the grandfather is like, "Get out of here." And Joe hits the father with a snow globe and seemingly by accident kills him.
Right.
Then Joe drives away. The little girl doesn't know what's going on, and she walks out of the house to get help, and she dies in the snow.
Right.
The cops arrest him for the death of the grandfather and of the girl, but they can't prove it because Joe has completely refused to talk.
Right.
He's presumably totally depressed and upset, and he's sitting in a isolated jail cell, and he's just like, I think he's just content to kind of rot away there, and he just doesn't want to participate, But the police use this new technology, and they put a marble in Joe's head involuntarily, I'm guessing, while he's in prison. They let the marble absorb his personality and all of his memories. Then they extract it. Then they have this John Hamm guy who's an expert at interacting with these AIs.
Right.
And as a way of reducing his sentence of being involved with that murder with the nerd, John Hamm says, "Okay, I'll interact with the AI and I'll get this guy to confess to killing the grandfather and manslaughtering the child." They put Hamm and the AI Joe, so it's not the real Joe,
right?
It's an AI Joe, in a cabin together for 5 virtual years.
Yes.
Now, John Hamm only has to sit there for, presumably like a couple minutes or something.
But what I don't remember is John Hamm jumping in and out of that?
They didn't say, but I think they set the setting to be like it, because it's
it's not a John Hamm marble. It's John Hamm.
It's John Hamm,
okay.
Yeah. And so John Hamm can somehow transport kind of an avatar into this cabin to interact with a virtual AI Joe, and Hamm over time, and this is the main story that we finally arrived to in this description. Hamm gets the AI to confess to the crime,
right?
And they use this AI confession to convict the real Joe, even though the real Joe never confessed.
Yeah, you would think that this would be so interesting legally, right? Be like, nope, my client never confessed. Well, no, the copy of your client. Prove scientifically that it's the same.
Right. They leave the AI in the cabin, and it's Christmas Day, and so they leave the office, and the guy who's in charge of the AI Joe, they let time go by really fast. They say 1,000 years per minute, they say. So I calculated this, and this is like, for 12 hours, maybe if they come in the next day, which isn't guaranteed because maybe it's a weekend or a vacation or something. But if they come in the next day, it's a minimum of 720,000 years. So this guy is sitting in this cabin with a dead girl, like off in the distance.
Talk about a punishment.
For almost 1,000,000 years.
For an eternity.
And these AIs, as we have established, are fully human. They are 100% human in the way that they feel, And so they leave this little revenge thing on this AI, but it's just an AI, so who cares?
Just an AI.
Yeah.
And then the real human just goes to jail or something?
Yeah.
Can't remember.
Well, they don't say, but
isn't that fucked up?
They imply that
the fake AI gets a worse punishment, or the AI gets a worse punishment.
Even though the AI didn't do anything.
That's right.
Right. John Hamm isn't off the hook, though. As a lighter punishment than, I'm guessing, prison, he has been blocked by everyone on the planet.
That's right. I remember now.
So he can't interact
a blob
with a single human being, and he's red to everyone. So everyone knows that blob there
Scarlet
is a criminal. It's not just someone that I blocked a long time ago or someone who blocked me. It's someone who's terrible. And so he's walking around in the streets, and he can't talk to a single human being. He's like locked in his own jail cell, and but he's free in the world, which would be horrible. You couldn't watch TV. You could only watch maybe cartoons. Maybe that would work, or read books.
And again, this goes, I again love the episode, but there would be so many problems with this because immediately all these people would probably become homicidal. Like they would go sort of crazy and want to and then eventually they'd get into altercations, and this doesn't prevent them from becoming violent, especially if these are criminals, right?
Right.
Presumably these are criminals.
Right.
So it would be fairly dangerous.
Yeah, and how would you get food? Like you go to the store to buy, you can't communicate with the cashier,
Oh, by the way, if you are someone who's sort of a criminal, but maybe is not a full sociopath, but now everyone you see is just a blob, how much easier is it to detach yourself from the social significance of hurting someone?
Yeah, I don't know. So what does this episode tell us about human nature, Berto?
Oh man, so many things. So on the one hand, the desire for, normally it would be the desire for immortality with the AI bit, but this time it was the desire for convenience. I want someone, a slave basically, but no one knows me as good as I know myself. So I'm willing to torture a version of myself indefinitely so I can be happy. It's like the ultimate, entitled consumerist society,
Narcissism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so that's one thing. The other one is...
Well, let me ask you, Berto, have you ever blocked anyone on Facebook before?
Have I blocked? Personally, I have not blocked. I know people have deleted me, and I have deleted a few people that I actually didn't know very well.
Well, deleting is different. I mean, and that's a version of blocking.
Yeah.
But I've actually blocked people before.
You've blocked people. Okay.
And it's interesting. It's an interesting, I don't know if you know this, but the way it works, and I only learned this through, just through experiencing it, because they don't really tell you, is it was someone that was in a group of people that I knew. So it wasn't just a one-off person. So when the person I blocked would comment on one of our mutual friends' photos, I would see, they would say, click here to see 5 comments. And I'd click and there'd only be 4 comments. So Facebook it was a glitch in that they would tell me how many comments, but I couldn't see all the comments.
Right.
Whereas if you block, I don't know if they do this now, but this is like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. And maybe they've corrected for that. But I could tell, like, oh, that person must have commented here, or that person must have liked it. That was another thing. Like, if there were 5 likes and you clicked on it, you would only see 4 of the people who liked it. And so it was interesting because they were out there and I was still connected to. So, I unfriended them and blocked them. Okay. That was the difference. So you're right in that you can delete them as a friend.
Yeah.
But
you would still see their stuff.
But you would still see their stuff.
But if you block them.
But if you block them, then every picture you're tagged in, they can't see, and you can't see any picture they're tagged in. If it's just a regular picture without a tag, then Facebook doesn't know. But if you are tagged in a photograph and you're on another friend's situation, then they can't see it. So it is kind of like this show. And I have to say it was extremely convenient because because otherwise I was going to have to completely unfriend all those people.
Right.
Or just never interact with any of them. Or if they ever take a picture of me, I have to say, don't post that because I don't want that other person to see it. And so I remember feeling like, man, Facebook really was smart with this block. It seems severe.
Yeah.
But I might have closed my Facebook account.
Right.
Otherwise.
Yeah, you needed that sort of prevention for. You're right, because you don't want to fully destroy your circle.
Right.
But if it's at the cost of interacting with this person that you really don't want to interact with.
And in terms of code, it's so easy, right? It's just an if-then,
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think you were finding some gotchas there. There would be a lot of edge cases. And that's where it would get tricky. Where it's like, oh, right, we forgot about the counter. Or we forgot about the case where you've blocked someone and they've blocked someone else, but now there's a post where all 3 of you are tagged and we didn't catch it. There's all these kind of situations where you'd have to... But the code,
for such a severe and interesting societal action.
Oh, right. Yeah. Comparatively,
it's a tiny little bit of code that says when you press this button, if then don't show. They can't see it. It's not hard to do that. And the implications of it was so interesting because like in this episode, with the click of a button, you can just block someone, and how with those in-eye cameras that everyone has,
and the implication was that it wasn't just contact lenses they could remove; they were like implant kind of things.
You were like born with them or something, and so you couldn't take out those cameras. They were like you're stuck with it, and it's interesting, And when I watched this episode, I remember thinking like, oh yeah. So I think one of the things that this episode shows us that I think is actually happening today with like blocking, and even before social media, you could essentially block someone. You could just be like, don't call me. You break up with someone and that person tries to call you and you just don't answer the phone. You screen their phone calls. Or they leave you a voicemail and you don't call them back. Or they email you and you just don't email them back. Or they show up at your house and you don't answer the door. I mean, we could block people before technology.
Yeah.
And this episode just shows that reaction that we have. And sometimes that's healthy and sometimes it's not so great, because when you break up with someone, it's very tempting to just block them, you know, and sometimes that's a good thing if they're abusive or something like this. But in my experience, if it's a non-abusive situation, this effort to block is not always what's best for the two people. In that if you've been together for 5 years and you break up, there needs to be often a grief period where you have contact within reason and have conversations and get angry and get sad and have some closure around some things and have some questions and have some compassion and work some stuff out, like who gets the car and blah blah, and tell each other that you wish them well. And there's a lot of things that culturally we don't support.
Right.
When you break up with someone, particularly if it's a non-marriage situation, if it's like a 2-year-long relationship, people say clean break, don't look back, don't talk to that person. Well, he's calling me and he's upset. Well, just he needs to move on. Or why are you calling him? You broke up with him. The reality is, and not all the time, but a lot of the time, it's healthier to have these messy conversations and not block the other person.
Yeah, unless it's, obviously if this was an abusive situation, you got to get away and things like that. You don't want to contact them because they'll find you. But in most cases where it's just, you grew apart, whatever, I do see that complete immediate. And by the way, in the movie, because in reality, the person could say, okay, look, I'm done with you. Get out of my house. We're done, right? And that already sort of feels like that. But in this case, that person can take the unilateral action where in that moment, right there and then, your vision is impaired.
Right.
It feels so much more aggressive.
Right.
Whoa.
Like right in like the first inkling of a fight, she just presses that button and then forever you're done.
Yeah.
And so...
imagine if you were in a room with her and her family. And let's say that this applies not just to the kids, but your family circle. Like your network basically gets these settings immediately, or at least so imagine you're in the room, she's pissed off, she flips the thing, and everyone's a blob to you.
Right.
It's like,
Yeah, let's just sort of, this story, if we were to rewind and go, you know what, honey? Just, slow down. Tell him what happened. He's going to find out anyway.
Right.
Tell him what happened. He's going to be angry. Right. Now, here's another element that I think they threw in, as with all the great episodes of Black Mirror, is he was violent when he got angry.
That's true.
As we can see. So maybe she had good reasons to not only cheat on him, but also to really just block him and be like, dude, this guy is unstable. They gave us just a little bit of hint of that. But having said that, if he wasn't, necessarily that way, we could slow her down and say, look, just unblock him, meet him in a public place, tell him you're sorry, tell him that the baby is not likely his, and that's why you're doing what you're doing, and let him mourn that, and let him grieve that, and let him know that, and let him hate you, and let him be angry, and let him be sad, so that he can move on with his life.
Right.
But if you block him, he's always going to wonder about his own child.
Right.
And you don't want that hanging over your head. Plus, he's going to kill the daughter and your father, which is no good.
Yeah, you would think you would need, by law, some sort of term limits. Like, you can momentarily block someone because that might be a way to, like, for safety or things like that. But that you couldn't just actually take that action without a court order, because it does infringe on the other person's freedom.
But Facebook, you can block someone right away.
The difference is it doesn't affect your vision and your ears.
But it only affects the vision of that person. So,
but if that person or someone related to them, like their kids, are in the vicinity, like your eyesight is not working right and your ears are not working right.
Well, but as a smaller analogy, if I block you,
right,
and if my kids have Facebook accounts, I can tell them also block them.
Right.
It's the same thing. I'm just saying, like, I can imagine a future where with that technology we would have no problem saying, yeah, that's fine. If you want to choose to block someone, then go for it. That doesn't infringe on their rights. That just infringe it's your right to keep them out of your life.
I just think I think in practice you would, because think about, people could spam that. Like, I could go down the street and randomly block people. Think how annoying it would be that as you're walking by, stuff turns to blobs and you start hearing mumbles and stuff, and you have no control over it.
Yeah.
I think you'd have to have some regulations.
There'd have to be like block court or something.
Yeah.
This episode, to me, about human nature says that, again, we love revenge when we're blocking people. It's just like, and John Hamm gets, his punishment.
Right.
Which doesn't necessarily fit the crime.
And there wasn't even an indication that it was temporary.
Right. I think, yeah, it's like forever. Also, another thing here is, again, with other episodes in Black Mirror, it's like, if we had this tech to make AI,
right,
then you could do it for a lot of things.
It's burying the lead is what happens.
Right.
It's like, hey, how would you like a way to control your home appliances that's really cool? You're like,
right.
Oh, that sounds great. Okay, we've created full human AI consciousness copy of you.
Yeah.
But that's not important right now.
Yeah.
What's important is that we...
Because like we were saying earlier, just make like the perfectly emotionally adjusted butler.
Right.
Who might even be kind of stupid, but
right.
like really good with some things, and perfectly content
right.
to sit in a all white room doing nothing.
That is seriously like saying, like, Kirk, did you hear we doubled our global production of coffee?
Wow.
Yeah, it's great. How did you do it, Humberto? Oh, well, we created a perfect recreation of Earth, down to everyone that lives in it and everything. Wait, what?
Yeah. You can do that now? Yeah, exactly.
But that's not important.
Yeah, it also, as we were saying earlier, is a reflection of how narcissistic we are. We want our AI to be a complete copy of me.
Yeah.
We will also go to any length to make our life just a little bit easier. We can destroy the emotional life of an AI just so we can have our toast correctly, which I can absolutely imagine people doing.
Well, actually, not to get all soapboxy, but as I think I've mentioned before, like I've become more and more vegan. But this is an important realization that as humans, for now, who knows how long, we have been comfortable with the idea, like, well, okay, we will kill other animals for food. But then it got to the point where, like, we will farm animals in close conditions that are horrible and blah, 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 and basically sort of torture them because we want food and leather and things like this. And so it is sort of naive to say or to imagine, like, yeah, no, we would never imprison an AI just for our comfort. It's like, no, if we use history as evidence, it's like we absolutely would.
Right. Especially if it's incremental to the point where the AI is culturally considered to be a thing,
Right.
even after it crosses the threshold into what we would ethically call consciousness.
That's right.
The other thing that I thought of was, imagine if you could block people, how useful it would be for people that were actually like harmful to you, you know, like bullies
Yeah.
or abusive partners, as we were talking before, Alex Jones, a weirdo on the bus that's trying to interact with you, certain politicians.
The only thing again is that I think that there would be the actual physical risk, which could actually be exacerbated.
Yeah.
But
women could block men who catcall them on the street, you know, like there's just all sorts of implications that would make this useful to people. You could just like, you have crossed the line. I'm now cutting you out of my reality because you're no fun anymore.
Right.
Now, of course, that would be abused, right?
You could also imagine a different way to approach this problem, which would be, instead of blocking people, you could make yourself appear different to people. So let's say you're a beautiful woman and you don't like the attention. You can make yourself look completely plain.
Yeah, they didn't show that though.
Right.
Yeah.
But you could imagine, like, I'm going to change how people see me.
Or like combined with episode 2 in season 1, you could buy an avatar, like a funky hat that everyone has to see you wearing, even though you don't actually.
Yeah.
Or like sparklers coming out of your head or something.
That's right.
All right. What's the bottom line about season 2 of Black Mirror, Berto?
I felt, although there are some episodes they're all really great, but I think I like season 2 better than season 1.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if I needed to consider what's it called? White Christmas? White
Christmas.
I wasn't sure if I needed to consider it as part of season 2, but if we're considering it as part of season 2 is definitely my favorite because this is my favorite episode.
Yeah.
I thought that they broadened a little bit, that what they were exploring in a really cool way. I also felt like there was a sort of a more mature approach, like more subtlety to some of the episodes.
Right.
But yeah, anyways, I really thought it was a strong season. Really great ideas.
Yeah, season 3, which we haven't talked about, Nosedive. That's the one with liking, you like each other.
So again, it's going to be
Play Test. That's the one with the horror play test.
Yeah.
Shut Up and Dance.
Is that the 80s one?
Yes. Yeah. No, that's San Junipero.
Oh, right.
Shut Up and Dance is, now we're just talking about other episodes.
Yeah.
Third episode, British Science episode, story about Kenny, a teenager, who's suddenly blackmailed by a mysterious hacker.
Oh, right.
Men Against Fire.
I haven't seen that one.
That one is about...
Don't give it away.
Okay. A soldier. And then Hated in the Nation.
Oh, wait, no, I did see Man Against Fire then.
Okay. And Hated in the Nation is about the bees.
Okay, so I haven't seen that one. That's the one I haven't seen.
That one, Hated in the Nation, was probably my second favorite, least favorite, least favorite. Yeah.
I see.
And the distant last was the first episode of season 1.
Oh yeah, right. The pig.
Yeah. The last episode of season 3 felt akin to the episode 1 of season 1. But yeah, season 2 definitely took it to a new level. And I mean, you got the Domhnall Gleeson episode. Yeah. You got the White Bear episode, which is so
great.
innovative, so innovative. The Waldo moment, which was, pretty good. But then this White Christmas episode is just like
mind-blowing.
Just mind-blowing.
Literally.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so good. And yeah. So, it's 74 minutes, so it's like almost movie length. Yeah, if you have enjoyed this episode, want us to talk about season 3, let us know. We probably do it anyway.
Yeah.
But
also, I just need to watch that last episode, then we can do it.
Berto, let's pick a couple more patrons to give swag to, because we only picked one from. So pick another letter.
Okay. Jay.
J, and a second letter.
O.
J-O. We have
Jonathan?
one, two.
Joseph?
We have a bunch of Joes.
Josephine?
We have a bunch of J-Os, like 20, because there's Joshes and Joshuas and Joeys and Joannas. So give me a third letter.
Really? Okay. Now I'm sort of cheating. N.
Jon. John. John, you are going to get some swag in the mail.
Cool.
Pick another letter.
Okay. I want to do a letter I've never done.
I feel like you've done always the same letters.
No, but I'm trying to not. Like, for example, have I done T? I haven't done T.
I'm gonna just scroll. Tell me when to stop.
Stop.
Okay. Jack.
Oh, no, we just did.
But Jack is going to
Okay.
get some swag. Oh no, Jack doesn't have his address, so I can't send him swag.
Ah, okay.
Jackie.
Jackie. Okay.
Jackie
You did just did steal from the T people, by the way.
Oh, okay, we'll do a T. I'll do T and tell me when to stop.
It's now.
Tim. Wait, didn't we already do Tim?
Did we have no?
Minneapolis. Well, he's gonna get it again. I every time you pick something, I always think you've done it before.
But I'm always surprised by just how many people there are. Because I'll pick a random letter like K, and you're like, well, there's 100 Ks.
Well, we have 400 patrons.
That's crazy.
And we want to get up to about 600-ish so that we can reach our next goal, so that we can start to donate to petfinder.com,
Right.
which is an organization, a humongous organization that helps save pets from being euthanized by taking care of them and connecting them with people who want to have pets. That's how I have my 2 cats. And I think Pet Finder also does foster care as well, which I used to live in a different place, and my neighbor was a foster home for Pet Finder, and at any given time they had like 20 animals living in there. Yeah. And because they were empty nesters, and
I see.
And they had a bunch of bedrooms, and so each bedroom was like a different set of animals.
Crazy.
And so I would go over there and like play with all the different animals and stuff. All right, well, that does it for that long episode of Psychology in Seattle. Thanks for joining us out there. Please take care of yourself. And, if you're a patron, we love you so much. And if you're not a patron, we like you.
We like you. We're in like with you.
Yeah. But take care of yourself, because
you deserve it.